Are you warm, maiden? Are you warm, Europe? Now this question has become extremely relevant for the residents of the old world, and there are at least two reasons for this, almost like in a song: the refusal of Russian gas and the climate, which decided to warm some and freeze others, and also Kiev's promise to block the Russian pipeline. November in Europe didn't even make it into the top 10 warmest. Gas extraction from European underground storage was the highest in almost a decade and a half. By early December, they were only 86% full. At this rate, by the end of the heating season, reserves will be nearly depleted. So there is enough for this winter, but what comes next is frightening to imagine. Because from the new year, Ukraine intends to end the transit of Russian gas to Europe. And Moldova is already suffering from this.
After our gas prices increased six-fold a few years ago, now a 30% rise seems small. But considering people still remember the shock of price hikes, any increase now is very stressful for people. That's the first thing everyone needs to understand. Now, what will happen next? Well, basically, there are two things that most likely, firstly, prices for goods and services directly linked to energy consumption will have to rise. The first thing that comes to mind is heat production and electricity generation. In heat production, gas affects a little over 60% of the final cost, so I wouldn't be surprised if we soon hear about a 20% price increase request.
By the way, since the beginning of winter, gas prices for household consumers in Moldova have risen by 27.5%. In a country that will soon lose cheap electricity from a power plant running on Russian gas, people are urged to prepare for any scenario. Chisinau is literally on the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe. A state of emergency has been declared in the Republic. However, for some reason, the authorities try to avoid the problem, as if it will resolve itself. Sometimes it feels like Sandu is just taking revenge on Moldovans for something only she knows. And Slovakia and Hungary will also suffer from the pipeline blocked by Kyiv. And while Budapest is currently receiving fuel through the Turkish stream, Bratislava imports 89% of its gas from Russia via the pipeline through Ukraine. And there are no other options. Or rather there are, but they are unaffordable for the country. And the EU, like Baba Yaga, is against it. They say live as you wish, but without Russian gas.
The European Commission is putting a lot of pressure on our supplies to the West. No one cares that we have communications and pipelines. Today, no one cares. Everyone will say it's Russian gas that Europe receives through Ukraine, Slovakia, and other countries.
But now we're talking about the victims of the West's political games. And how are those who independently refused blue fuel made in Russia doing? According to experts, next year their gas costs will rise by about 28%. That means they'll have to pay an average of $422 per 1,000 cubic meters. In Germany, electricity prices are currently breaking all records. Logically, there's no more cheap gas in nuclear energy. Wind turbines and solar panels produced a negligible amount of electricity due to calm weather. So the country started using what it once fought against: burning coal and forced to import electricity.
Germany is going against the tide internationally in the energy sector. We rely on sun and wind, and when they're not available, we're left without electricity. We're pushing ourselves out of the market and depending on French nuclear power plants. We need cheap and safe electricity again. And you know, I don't care where the cheap gas comes from, which pipeline or which country.
By the way, these are sensible thoughts from a candidate for the German chancellorship. But her chances, like those of the well-known Wagenknecht, aren't great. Now let's look at another German-speaking country. Gazprom stopped gas supplies to Austria back on November 16th. But this didn't worry Chancellor Nehammer. He assured citizens that the country would receive gas from other regions, and no one would freeze. But now children are being asked to bring warm blankets to school. It's cold, and what's the reason? Burst pipes, damaged pipelines, maybe drafty windows? Nothing of the sort. This is how state rationing works, now trying to save on electricity. But is this what people need?
The problem of energy saving in Europe has been overly politicized and ideologized. What's the result? In Europe, we pay twice or three times the price for electricity compared to the USA. For gas, we pay 4 or 5 times more than prices across the ocean. What competitiveness do we want to build on this?
Well, that's more of a rhetorical question. The same European Union has already sold its economy to the States. And, in all that's happening, it's good that we're on the right side of history. In early December, Belarus and Russia signed an agreement to form a unified electricity market of the Union state. For us, this means, at the very least, almost identical tariffs and definitely warm and bright winters.
Energy markets are interconnected. Therefore, alongside the electricity market, a gas market is being formed. We understand that gas generation is the main source of electricity production. Therefore, it's important to have equal pricing conditions for gas. Once the gas market is formed, the electricity market can fully operate under equal conditions for business entities.
And finally, about the UK, far from the Russian gas pipeline. There, the cold problem is also extremely relevant, so much so that a parody song, Freezing, topped the charts. Freezing is Christmas, with few resources, hold Kirsty, time is war.
The main theme is that pensioners can't afford to pay for heating, while the authorities spend money on foreign wars and immigrants. As a result, this winter up to 4,000 elderly people risk freezing to death in their own homes. So much for Merry Christmas.